What's up, y'all? CP from Blue Eclipse Productions, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about EQ and how it affects your work while you're mixing. EQ, which is short for equalization, is handled through a plugin or a device that's called an equalizer. And pretty much what equalization is used for is to manipulate the frequency response of a signal or of a sound. Now, if you've ever used, say, like a HD TV or a car stereo or a home hi-fi system, you know, if you've used it to the point where you've gone into the settings, then you've encountered equalization before and you may not have realized it. But when you go into a device such as, you know, like I said, a car stereo, hi-fi living room setup, or your you know, car stereo TV. You know what I'm getting at, though. It usually has two main settings. It may have treble and bass, or it might have treble, mid-range, and bass, or, you know, it has different parameters that you can adjust. And say, for example, with the treble, like you're in your car, you increase the treble. That's when the sound in your car suddenly becomes brighter. You know, it has more of a bright sound because you're increasing the frequency response of the treble. And then as you know, say you reduce it, that's when you have a darker or a more muffled sound because you're reducing the frequency response of the treble. And same thing with the bass. You know, if you increase the bass, you're increasing the bass response. You know, it has a louder, more pronounced bass. And if you reduce the bass, then you reduce the frequency response for the bass. You have a less bassy kind of sound, and then it defaults back to treble and vice versa. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what EQ is in a nutshell. Now, I could stop the video here, but it wouldn't do you any justice. And what I actually plan on doing is trying to break it down on a much more, on a much better way of explaining, because if you don't have if you don't know all the different parameters of what most EQs can do, or you don't understand what kind of results you can get from using them, then more than likely you can easily abuse EQ. And it's sort of like compression. If you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up a great mix, you know. And it's the same thing with EQ, and that's why they're used so frequently. EQ and compression, they're very, very powerful, but they're also very, very easy to, you know, to make mistakes on if you don't know any better. So the way that EQ handles its adjustments of frequency response is through linear filters. Now, there's many different kinds. There's let me see. There's high shelf, there's low shelf, there's notch filter. You can there's a bell, high pass, low pass, etc. Now, there's two different types of EQ. There's graphical EQ and parametric EQ. A graphical EQ has a limited amount of frequency bands that are automatically set at fixed locations on that device, and its frequency response width per band cannot be adjusted. It's all equaled out. Like, say for instance, you have a 31 band equalizer, you know, so you on the left hand side you have your lowest, you know, like maybe 20 hertz, and then on your right hand side you have your highest, which is, you know, maybe 21 kilohertz or so. But you have a full range of bands that, again, they have fixed frequencies that you can adjust, and they have fixed widths of frequencies per band that you cannot adjust. And for parametric, on the other hand, parametric is more powerful in terms of you can dial in, or you can set wherever you want that band to be in the frequency, in the hertz range, and you can adjust how wide of a frequency response it affects by its Q. Now, I don't know the exact definition of what Q is off the top of my head, but Q is when you're messing with an equalizer, Q lets you adjust how wide of a frequency range that particular band is going to affect. All right, now I know what you're probably thinking. Well, GCP, that's all great and fine and dandy, but all right, how does that work for when I'm mixing, like you said at the beginning of the video? Okay, here's an example of how it would work. Say you're working on a song, right? And you have a bass line, like you have a finger bass, and on one track, and then on another track you have a piano, right? And when you solo the bass and you play it by itself, it sounds incredible, right? You know, it's got a lot of bass, it sounds clean, you know. And then you go and listen to the piano solo, you play that back by itself, same thing, sounds real clean, real nice, right? But then when you play both of the tracks together, right, then it seems like you can't really hear too much of the bass. It seems like you can't really hear too much of the piano. And what you wind up having is an unclear mix, like a muddy mix. And that's the complete opposite of what you want, right? When you're mixing a song, you want it to sound the best that it can possibly sound, right? So where EQ comes into play for this example that I'm saying is that you can use two EQs, one on the bass, one on the piano, and for the bass, you can increase the frequency response that sounds good, or the frequency responses that sound good, and you can reduce the frequencies that don't really contribute anything to the finger bass sound. It's just pretty much getting in the way, right? So you can reduce those frequencies that don't really give much meat to the finger bass sound. And same thing for the piano, right? You can increase the frequency response for the frequencies that sound good, and then decrease the frequencies that aren't really necessary for the sound. And if you manipulate both of them just right, it will allow you to hear the beauty of the bass and to hear the beauty of the piano and maintain clarity without muddying the sound, right? And that's one of the most powerful things you can do in your mix with EQ, is separating frequencies and making sure that every instrument in the song sits where it's supposed to sit. It's very important. You know, other things matter in terms of compression, reverb, other effects come into play, but ultimately that's what EQ is used for, and that's primarily why you need to understand it when you're mixing your songs. So again, I'm gonna stop this video for now, but I will continue to explain this in other videos or future parts. It's just gonna take me some time to really break it down and organize it for you, but I will do my best to make sure that you get all the knowledge you need, so that way when you go to grab that EQ plugin or use that EQ device, you can use it to the best of your ability. All right, thank you for watching. Happy mixing.